woman goes on what seems like a normal date, but unsettling behaviors from her date make her feel increasingly uneasy. After she escapes, she receives a chilling message suggesting she's still being watched. You know how you go on these dating apps, and most of the time it's pretty uneventful? Maybe you meet up, grab drinks, and either you hit it off or you don't. That's been my experience with Tinder for the most part, and I wasn't expecting much to change with Ben. Ben was, well, he was good-looking, laid back, not overly pushy, you know? His profile was normal, nothing crazy. He had this smile that put me at ease right away, and we got along well in our chats. So, when he asked me to grab dinner, I figured, why not? We met at this cute little restaurant downtown, one of those cozy places where everything feels relaxed. He showed up exactly on time, which was nice, and I thought the evening was off to a good start. He ordered for both of us, which normally would have annoyed me, but he made it seem like he was just trying to be polite. I wasn't mad about it. As the night went on, though, little things started to feel off. Ben had this weird way of turning every question back on me, and not in a flattering way. Like I'd ask him about his job, and instead of answering, he'd say something like, "Well, what do you do all day?" Or if I asked where he was from, he'd change the subject, almost like he didn't want to give me a straight answer. It wasn't super weird at first, just a little odd, but the more we talked, the more uncomfortable I got. There was this moment, I can't even remember exactly what he said, but it made me stop and think, I don't know this guy at all. Like, not even a little bit. All the back and forth messaging on Tinder, it suddenly felt like I'd been talking to a completely different person. Then, I noticed something. Ben hadn't touched his drink. Not once. I thought maybe he wasn't feeling well or something, but when I mentioned it, he just laughed it off and said, "I don't drink much." Which, okay, fair. But it felt more like he was watching me drink, waiting for me to loosen up or something. That's when the alarm started going off in my head. I kept telling myself, "You're overthinking this, Sarah. Stop being paranoid." But there was something about his eyes, this coldness in them, that really unsettled me. I decided to cut the night short. I told him I had an early morning and I'd need to head home soon. He didn't argue, just smiled and said he'd take care of the bill. But when we got outside, that's when things got worse. Ben offered to walk me to my car, which seemed polite enough at first. But as we were walking, he started steering me toward his car instead. "You parked far," he said. I hadn't mentioned where I parked at all. I stopped in my tracks and said I'd just grab an Uber. I was too freaked out to even drive at that point. He laughed, like I'd just told the world's funniest joke, but his eyes, they weren't laughing. He grabbed my arm, not hard, but enough to make it clear he wasn't joking anymore. "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. Let me drive you. It's safer." There was something about the way he said it that made my blood run cold. Every instinct in me was screaming to get away from this guy. I yanked my arm back, mumbled something about needing to meet a friend, and bolted across the street toward a group of people standing near a bar. Ben didn't follow, but I could feel him watching me. I called an Uber and waited in the crowd, my heart pounding the whole time. Ben didn't leave right away. He just stood there, leaning against his car, watching. I pretended to be texting on my phone, but really, I was just trying to keep my hands from shaking. When the Uber finally pulled up, I jumped in so fast I almost slammed the door on my own leg. The drive home was a blur. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting Ben's car to show up behind us, but it never did. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, drained from the adrenaline. I locked the door, triple-checked the windows, and collapsed on my couch, thinking, okay, that was weird, but it's over. Except, it wasn't. I was lying in bed a few hours later, scrolling through my phone, when I got this text. It was from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a spam message or something, but then I opened it. It said, "You were smart to run, but I'll see you again." I've always been cautious about dating apps, but after a long stretch of being single, I finally decided to give Tinder a try. My friends had been pushing me to get back out there, and honestly, I was getting a little tired of being alone. That's how I met Luke. From the start, he seemed perfect, charming, good-looking, and incredibly attentive. Our conversations felt natural, and within a few days, I found myself eagerly waiting for his texts. He had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world that mattered. We'd text all day, and he was always so thoughtful, asking about my day, sending me funny memes, just generally being sweet. I won't lie, it felt good. After a couple of weeks, we finally decided to meet up for a date. Our first date was pretty great, actually. We met at a trendy little restaurant downtown, and I felt at ease right away. Luke was just as charming in person, funny, smart, and engaging. He asked me tons of questions, really seemed interested in getting to know me, and by the end of the night, I was sure I wanted to see him again. Date 2 was just as good. We grabbed coffee and walked through the park, talking about everything from movies to our childhoods. There was something about Luke that felt so easy, so right. I was starting to let my guard down, thinking maybe I'd actually found someone worth spending more time with. But it was after the third date that things started to feel off. We had dinner at my place, just something casual. I cooked, we drank some wine, and everything seemed fine. But when the night ended and he left, something in my gut told me that something was wrong. I brushed it off as nerves, though. I mean, dating is nerve-wracking, right? I figured I was overthinking it. The next morning, I sent him a text like usual, just a simple, good morning, to see how he was. No response. I waited a few hours, sent another text. Nothing. I called him later that evening, but his number was disconnected. My first thought was that maybe he'd had some kind of emergency or something, but then I checked Tinder and his profile was gone, completely wiped. I tried not to freak out, telling myself maybe he just wasn't into me anymore. It happens, right? But the way he ghosted me so suddenly after everything felt wrong. I even tried searching for him on social media, Instagram, Facebook, but it was like he never existed. No trace of him anywhere. A few days went by and I started to move on, figuring it was just one of those things, another ghost story in the world of online dating. But then, a week later, a package showed up at my door. I hadn't ordered anything, so I was a little confused when I saw the delivery box sitting there. It wasn't marked with any store name, just a plain brown box. I opened it up, and inside was a small, expensive-looking bracelet. There was no note, no explanation, just the bracelet. I figured maybe it was some kind of weird mix-up and didn't think too much about it. But the next day, another package arrived. This time, it was a framed photo of me. It was a picture from one of our dates, the second one, where we'd had coffee in the park. I didn't even remember Luke taking this picture, but there I was, sitting on a bench, smiling into the distance. My heart dropped. This wasn't a mistake. Over the next few days, more packages arrived. Flowers, random little trinkets, and more pictures of me. Some of the photos were from our dates, but others were taken when I was out and about, like at the grocery store or while I was walking home. Someone had been following me, watching me. I was terrified. I couldn't shake the feeling that Luke, or whatever his real name was behind all of this. I went to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do. Without any direct threats, they couldn't take action. I felt helpless. I changed my number, deleted Tinder, and started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. One night, I came home from work to find a final package on my doorstep. I almost didn't want to open it, but I had to know. Inside was a small notebook. It looked old, worn, and the pages were filled with details about me, my schedule, places I liked to go, things I had said during our dates. There were even names of some of my friends and family members. I felt sick reading through it. I called the police again and showed them the notebook. That seemed to get their attention. They took it as evidence and told me they'd look into it. But weeks passed, and I heard nothing back. I started sleeping with the lights on, constantly checking the locks on my doors and windows. Every creak, every shadow made my heart race. Eventually, I did some more digging on my own. I found an online forum where women were sharing stories about dating app experiences that had gone wrong. One post caught my eye. A woman described matching with a man who sounded a lot like Luke, charming, attentive, and then suddenly disappearing after a few dates. She had received similar packages and photos and found out later that this man had been part of a group that used dating apps to target women, stalk them, and send them disturbing gifts to intimidate them. Some women had even disappeared after matching with him. I was terrified that I could have been one of them. I blocked out all the what-ifs, grateful that I had gone to the police when I did, but the whole experience left me shaken to the core. I never found out what happened to Luke. The police never followed up with me, and eventually the packages stopped arriving. But the fear never really left. I'm not sure if he'll ever resurface, but I've learned to be much more cautious. I thought I was safe, that I could control who I let into my life. But Luke showed me just how easily someone can deceive you, how they can disappear as if they were never real to begin with.